welcome to the Leadership Table. I'm Dr. Kevin Hairston, and this is a place where we bring leaders together who are part of our community and part of our city and part of our country who are making a difference. We're bringing together business leaders, faith leaders, community leaders, and those who believe that they ought to be at the table making a difference. Today, I'm excited. I'm starting a new season of the Leadership Table with a very special guest. I know this guest very well. She's a dynamic leader in her own right mind. She's involved not only in the corporate community, she's involved inside of the faith community, and she's a wonderful wife and mother. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have at the Leadership Table Miss Mia Hairston. Mia, thank you for being here to start our new season of the Leadership Table. And for those of you who don't realize by now, this is my wife. We celebrated almost over 30 years. And so I watched her grow in her own leadership. So thank you, Mia, for being a part of the Leadership Table.
Well, you know what? Thank you. Thank you. I am so excited to be here. And I want to say it's an honor for you to have me on your show, but I want to tell you how proud I am of you.
You know, it's funny
You
because
know,
as we talked about this like last year about you
yeah.
being on the leadership table, and you know what the dynamic of it is there was a part of me that wasn't necessarily nervous, but I'm
Yeah,
like me and you have these conversations all the time,
exactly.
and to have people kind of drop in on a conversation, I think is exciting.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing. I said, we're probably going to be talking about the stuff that we spend our time talking about anyway.
Right. Most
Yeah,
people might think, to be honest with you, we're not that boring. But but
a
we
little
do,
bit.
yeah, maybe a little bit. But we do challenge each other. We do talk out loud,
Yes, we do.
and we do kind of get to a place where we want to see each other be successful, and that means having conversations like this about
Yeah,
leadership.
exactly.
You
Love
know,
it.
so let's take everybody back. There's a lot of people out here who are going to be watching, who knows part of your story,
Yep.
but take us all the way back to beginning, Mia. Like as a young girl growing up, what were the types of things in your life that inspired you?
Oh, sure. First of all, I mean, a lot of people may not know I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky in the formative years of my life. And I grew up, we often laughed, on a little street called Short Street, in a very small community where really only family was on that street and close friends. And I grew up to a mother that was a single mother of three at that time. And what I loved about that, and I reflected on it, I grew up around so much love. And our family had a lot of women who led our family, and so that nurturing, instilling values very early on was a big part of my life. And then later, when I was about 10 years old, my mother married my stepfather, and we moved to El Paso, Texas, because he was in the military. And during that time, that was in my middle school years and right before high school, I was dropped into just a major culture shock. One, from the perspective, the military base was very diverse, and every single person around us in the neighborhood was of a different ethnicity or religion. And so I had to learn real quick how to make friends and to accept people for who they are. And also, I was educated by Latinas. I actually spoke, fluent Spanish up until my freshman year in high school. And I really learned an appreciation for the Hispanic culture and just for cultures in general. So, a lot of resilience, a lot of empathy for a lot other cultures and people was really instilled in me early on.
Now, when you think about it, when you look at your journey, and we talked about this too, especially, we'll touch on it just in a little bit when we're making a transition in ministry. I mean, being involved in ministry, right now you're involved in corporate America, but you've been very involved in inside of ministry. When you think about where you are today and all the things that you've done over the last maybe perhaps 30 to 40 plus years, did you always see yourself in this spot, or was there kind of a why moment, like an awakening moment where you go, God, I see you kind of shifting me? But had you always seen yourself kind of at the top of the tier in terms of leadership?
I always felt like I was drawn to leadership, but not always accepting of it. Like I felt like others saw leadership capabilities. Like I was on the drill team when I was in high school, and others wanted me to take a leadership role there. And then different activities that I experienced during my college years. I was an ambassador for the university, and people would always see leadership, but I never wanted leadership. Like that was, I could have been fine just being behind, being behind everyone else and supporting everybody else. And I think my leadership journey was birthed out of a strong desire for me to be independent and to take care of myself. I had an unforeseen circumstance happen in my life where my mother, again, was went through a divorce, which was fine, and she had to handle a lot of things. And me and my siblings needed to start growing up and really taking on our own lives. And that was right out of high school. And I remember not having enough money, not having enough, things, but then had so many people around me. But at some point, I said, Mia, you're either going to seize this opportunity in front of you to get your education or you're not. And I became relentless about pursuing the opportunity. Not perfect by any means, but I became relentless. And out of that drive, I found that when I graduated college, that those leadership skills, like I paid my way through college, and you know this, like I waited tables. I waited tables throughout my college career, and really made sure that I had what I needed to make sure that I could be successful. And so when I went into the work world, I just took those traits, and there was a natural, right, like a natural fit with corporate America.
You talked about like waiting tables, and it kind of reminds me, and we've had this conversation before. We've
Yeah,
even had it, in terms of our own daughter, that we live in a world today where a lot of young people, especially with social media, they want success tomorrow. They want
exactly.
a success tonight,
Yep.
and they don't really see the grind. And even when we were making the transition in the church, and I remember making this comment out loud. I said, a lot of you guys see us in our 30th season, but you
Right.
wasn't there like in season one. You know, when you talk about some of the things that you have to go through in terms of some of the trauma, perhaps, or some of the uneasy moments of your childhood or even adulthood, and some of the things you had to do, wait tables, or perhaps family members are going through certain challenging circumstances. How did those things impact you in terms of helping to develop you into the person that you are today?
You know, I think at the time I was definitely not reflective. I think I became in reactive mode. And I was saying to myself, you've got to survive. You've got to survive. And I started looking around, and I had also started to see role models that emerged, role models that, and my mom, she definitely was a role model, but I started to see additional role models of individuals that were at the top of their game, or individuals who, like me, came from meager situations and were able to achieve certain things. And they became an inspiration to me. And I felt like if they could do it, I could do it also. And I also felt like in that resilience piece that I could wear my trauma, right? Like I wear my trauma as a badge of honor, and I could use that story to really, it be a crutch. But I decided that I didn't want to do that. I felt like it was the launching pad by which I wanted to launch. And I found inspiration in giving back. I found inspiration in finding other young ladies or young gentlemen who were coming up as well, who had similar stories to me that could relate. And so I felt like, God really worked it to the good. No matter what, the Lord really worked it to the good.
It's funny because, me and you, again, we have these conversations all the time. And, I think about some of the conversations we have with our daughter,
Yeah.
and it kind of reminded me of when I was growing up, and my dad would tell them stories about how they, walked 3 miles to school, and, and the blizzard was, like 12, 20 feet of snow,
Yep.
and you hear those stories and you're like, oh, Man, come on. If I hear another story about y'all walking 5 miles, but then I found myself kind of doing things with our daughter.
Yep.
Like I'm going, man, you didn't have to go through what I did. We didn't have no Uber, and I had to take a couple buses. And so reflectively, you start thinking about some of the things that you had to do in order to get by. You realize that part of your story, it wasn't easy, but you made it anyway.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
At all. My mother, she told me that they walked in a blizzard and
Hmm.
she carried her baby brother because he had asthma
Hmm.
on her back,
Hmm.
a mile and a half to school. Like
Right.
all of the stories that her shoes cracked off of her feet
Right.
because they were
Right.
plastic. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that was a true story.
Right.
But we thank goodness for evolution.
But you
Yeah.
talked about role models and stuff like that and mentors, and your mother being one of them, probably at the top of the list.
Yeah.
But are there anybody, if you really think about some of the giants in your life,
Yeah.
are there people that come to mind? And the reason why I ask that is because, and it's important for people to understand, even from a biblical standpoint, in
Yeah.
Psalms 1, he talks about having wise counsel around you.
Absolutely.
Kind of building. He's making reference to building a community of individuals who
Yeah.
you can lean on. And going back to your own story, are there individuals that pop out of your mind? You go, man, this is a giant in my life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I not necessarily by name, but by characteristic. Like I would characterize them as some that were in my family, my aunts. I
Hmm.
talked about being raised by a village of women.
Hmm.
And they were unapologetically spiritual, unapologetically loved the Lord, and unapologetic about caring for their family.
Hmm.
And they were unapologetic about the way you presented yourself, even if you did not have the means. So we shopped at thrift stores, right? We made it look like we had something when there was nothing.
Hmm.
And those individuals, my aunts instilled the value of having a personal relationship with Christ. They instilled the value of putting your family first. They also instilled the value of not being afraid to work and to take care of a family. We may have been a little short on the self-care side, but all of those traits I think I embody and take on today. And I've had, mentors in the corporate world, like giants in the corporate world across my 32-year experience in corporate America that were incredibly amazing, that showed me what it meant to be in a man's world, what it meant to be in the room when you were the only, what it meant to really find your voice in that world. And they gave me wings. They gave me confidence. They would share with me not only the things that like I needed to improve in, but they shared with me the things I was good at. Because a lot of times it can be cutthroat in those atmosphere, and people don't want to tell you what you're good at. But they told me, hey, you shined, your leadership shined over here, or your speaking abilities were great, or your intellectual ability in solving this problem was superb. Keep doing those things. And so I have like used it as a ladder and built on that over the years.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that because even as we um, have talked about in the past, I mean, and we've been married over 30 plus years, and so you watched my journey, I've watched your journey, and what a lot of people don't realize is that you started in the call center
I did.
for your company.
Yep.
And so it wasn't like you just kind of got birthed into executive leadership. You were in the call center, but you were faithful in terms of what you were trying
Hmm.
to do in your job. You were trying to grow. You were trying to listen to those around you. Do you feel like you've achieved some corporate success, some business success? Do you feel a sense of responsibility for not just all persons who work in corporate America, but young women like yourself? Do you feel a sense of like, because people were there for me,
Yeah.
I have a responsibility to be there for others?
1000%.
Hmm.
And I feel like there comes a point in your career and in life, and you're in this right now,
Hmm.
where you move from, sort of wanting the next thing, the
Hmm.
next big thing, the next big promotion, the next big opportunity, to one of impact and significance.
Hmm.
And when you move to the impact and significance, so much of that becomes about other people and not about you, right? Like, and so I want to see people succeed. I knew that some of the mentors I talked about earlier, that those mentors, they had their fair share of struggles and they shared those very transparently with me. And it made it a little easier for me. So I feel like that's the same thing that I want to do for the next generation is to share one, you belong in this room, regardless of who you are, what your skin color is, or your gender. You belong in this room. Act like it.
That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good advice. And that leads us into thinking like, we have a sense of responsibility to give back. And again, me and you talk about this all the time. That we're as we've navigated inside of that 30-year journey, who are we investing in? Who
Right.
are we helping to mentor? Who are we helping to become that next leg of leadership? And this is a question, Mia, that I ask everybody at the leadership table. I ask them a couple questions, but this is one of them, and that is, how confident are you now that you're kind of like on the other side of the stream? And you're not that young guppy kind of swimming
Yep.
upstream as you were before. How confident are you in those who are on that next leg of leadership, and you have a responsibility of passing the baton to? Do you have enough confidence that they're going to do a great job?
I think that this next generation of leaders will supersede us. I think that this next generation of leaders are faster, are smarter, even, where I feel like though, there are opportunities in this next generation is the ability to learn and to slow down and not try to make things happen. One, operate, within the timing of God, within the timing of the opportunity, but then also respectfully, like you and I did. I mean, you had Pastor Gilliard, I've had mentors as well. You've had keep Pastor Troy. I mean, there's so many mentors that we can name that we sit at their feet because we know that they have a lot of experience. And so I feel like knowledge without sort of understanding sometimes can be disastrous. The biggest impact that you can have as a leader is on people. People are the largest resource in the world. Human resource is the largest resource in the world. So I don't care if it's technology, I don't care if it's corporate America, I don't care if it's healthcare, if it's nonprofit. We will always manage people, regardless of AI's impact on the world. And so leaders having that sixth sense and ability to lead with empathy, to lead with care, to listen at the feet of those who have come before them. I believe actually it will make or break a person's leadership and success.
No, that's good. That's real good. Now let's transition a little bit, because you've kind of wore a couple hats over that 30-year journey. We've kind of leaned in to talk about, man, your corporate journey, but you also, serve as a faith leader. Me and you have been together, man, in a lot of different spaces in terms of church leadership, and
Absolutely.
and we're still riding that wave. That some say
We don't
you don't
retire. We
retire
don't
from it. You
retire.
just
Yep.
do something different.
Yeah.
But how did you? I think the magical question of today's time together is,
Hmm.
what did that feel like, having to leave the office, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and but still walk in that call to faith ministry? To some looked at you as a first lady of a church,
Hmm.
others looked at you as a women's leader, some just looked at you as a leader, period, over people. How did you kind of balance that, and how did that play a role in shaping your leadership?
Yeah, and again was not something that was easy, even though people have shared that it looked easy. It wasn't always easy. And I always feel like, for me personally, my values being family first, God first, always drove decisions regardless. I mean, we've had opportunities to relocate, and we knew that it would be detrimental, on our daughter not being around family. Like that to me, right? Like was a way that we said we want to stay connected to family, her cousins, and all the things. I also felt like, there were non-negotiables. Non-negotiables, even though, and I might have a unique journey, having so many leadership opportunities over those 30 something years, that every level required a different level of expectation of you as an individual. And I would, limit my travel schedules. When it called for more travel, I would make sure that I was home. I was not gone more than 1 or 2 nights. I mean, those are just practical things. But I also did what I call work life integration. And so, not seeing things like separate, like I had church over here, then I had my family over here, then it was corporate, because it never fit in those three boxes so neatly.
Mm-hmm.
There were times where all of those worlds would converge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you talk about it, like when I was, had to take a trip out in LA and we had to serve at Faith Missions, and I'm on a red eye on a Friday night, right?
Uh,
Come back to serve at Faith Missions, and
well,
then
no,
Kennedy's in tow with that.
but it's funny. I wanted to make sure that we said that out loud.
Yeah,
I could remember many of the days where you showed up to an event and the people at the event, church event, and the people at the event didn't know you just stepped off a plane,
exactly.
and but you were committed, you did it, and you didn't advertise, and I think that's one thing me I can compliment about you and your leadership. And I hope it, so I believe some of it has rubbed off on me, and that is, you just did it and you didn't really necessarily have to advertise. I mean, we see so much on social media where even as faith leaders, they got to tell you what they're doing day by, like a play
Right,
by play.
right, right,
Sometimes you just got to do it.
right.
You can't tell the people, man, that you just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You can't tell folk, man, that this how much it took you to be there. Like somehow it's you're doing them a favor. I saw you literally travel across the country on some occasions, get off a plane, drive to an event, and then leave the event and then spend a whole lot of time with your family. And I said she never advertised it; she just
Thank
did it.
you.
And no, and I think that's a compliment because
Yeah.
it said that not only did you value the responsibility of your work,
Mm-hmm.
your job, but that you also were committed to what those things that God was saying for you in your life, and then at the same time you made sure that you put family there. And
Yeah, and
and
I,
and I think that's a question. I think a question is to a lot of leaders, how do you balance
yeah.
those different hats?
I think you keep the main thing the main thing. One, we know our daughter, like she's going to demand that we pay attention to her,
Right. Definitely
right?
that. Definitely that.
And so, with one, just making sure that her gifts and her talents, right, all the things that she was involved in, that regardless of us having our responsibilities, that she was able to dance competitively and
Hmm.
cheer competitively,
Right,
right, and
right.
basketball and volleyball and
Yeah.
all the things.
Yeah,
And
and just as a note,
yeah,
Daddy was coaching some of those things.
Daddy was coaching.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And then also making sure, not only that, but that she was well rounded from a faith-based perspective. She was
yeah,
heavily involved in church, and
right,
then making sure we were nurturing her, at home in some of the practices that we were doing there, and loving on her there. And I think those things kind of drove like our schedules. And so you and I laugh because, we made some decisions over the years that probably weren't popular.
right,
Like we were gone on Christmas a lot of
yeah,
times because we decided that we would prioritize our family on vacations.
yeah,
And some even in the clergy may have been like, "What? That's heresy." But we felt like that was an opportune time. I was
right,
off, and I have no regret. After 30 years in ministry, I
right,
think it was the absolute best thing to
right,
do.
right,
So, Kevin, we've both made this together, and I'll say too, you've made it easy for me
hmm,
to do what I do, because a lot of men would have been very intimidated
right,
by the roles that I played, and you never once
yeah.
were like that. You were incredibly supportive. So
No, no,
thank you for your love and your support.
I saw what God was saying was for both
Yeah.
of us, and your success was my success, and my success was your success.
Yep.
And I think that's a marriage principle. Maybe that's for another show. Maybe we were talking about marriage, but I think that's a collective thing that we had from the very beginning, that we were cheering for each other,
Mm-hmm.
and we still cheer for each other, respectfully, And I remember being at an event that you were part of, man, from a corporate standpoint, and I remember telling a clergy person, I said, Normally when we're at religious functions, she's Pastor Harrison's wife. But then when I'm at corporate functions, I'm Miss Mia's husband.
Right.
So I said I get the chance to be the husband tonight, and that's just funny for us to be able
You
to
good eye
learn.
candy though.
Yeah,
You
I
know, you
thought
are.
I thought, I
He's
tried to
blushing.
keep a flavor, a little bit of trophy husband. But no, but I think we cheer for each other,
We do.
and I
Yep.
think that's what we've always been trying to do in the midst of it all, is push out. Let me ask you this before we wrap up. One question is, how does Mia do self care? Like with
Goodness.
all that you talked about, I mean, if you really got a pen and paper out, it would be exhausting to say this is what Mia Harrison does. But in the midst of all that, how does Mia Harrison self care?
Ooh, Mia Hairston had to learn self care. I felt like a lot of it happened when we transitioned out of local ministry. It became accelerated and accelerated from the perspective of almost that responsibility from week to week is no longer there, right? And I decided one of the things that I wanted to do beyond, and you know this, like I exercise and I eat healthy, very much so. I took on like an even further, I think I doubled down on my health, was intellectually, I was urging for something higher. And so I decided to go back to school and get my master's. I had started, I mean, you talk about work life balance. I had started, if you recall, I had started working on my master's probably about 15 years ago. And because Kennedy was little and we were juggling church, I actually had to drop out. Still had a 4.0, but I could not manage that. But now that she's grown, I took on that responsibility and I was able to get my master's. And so I also realized the importance of community away from the familiar places of family and even from church. And I have a wonderful group of sisters that we have a book club and we do books that are just really educating us on societal issues. And I am enjoying that and doing a lot more travel. I feel like my mental well-being I have leaned into as well. And so, I feel like I'm in a good place.
Now, does your book club read any Kevin Harrison books?
I'm working on that. I'm working on that. They got to be a little
If
bit
you got,
more in
listen,
the
anybody who's
self-help.
viewing yeah, if anybody who's watching this episode, make sure your book club has Kevin Harrison book at the top, because I've been trying to get your book
Well,
club
I think the
to
Deacon's
read.
daughter might be a good
Deacon's
contender in
daughter.
the top
Yeah, yeah,
five.
yeah. There's some books that may not make it,
The-
but no, but
yeah,
I appreciate that, because I think it is important to make sure self care is included, because for many leaders, they're so mission minded that they forget to take care of themselves.
exactly.
And let me ask you this as we get ready to close out, Mia. Um, if you had any advice for emerging leaders, if you can look back at maybe perhaps at the beginning of your career, at the beginning of your journey, and say, this is what I would tell someone who is on that leadership journey, what would you say to them?
Oh, goodness. A couple of things come to mind. One, I think figuring out the people pieces of it very early and not seeing people as a means to an end, but seeing people as one, something to be cared for and something to be nurtured. And that God places people in your life for a purpose. And our ability to connect with people is 100% mandatory. And then I would say, too, don't think too highly of yourself and don't take yourself too seriously, because there will be points in your career where things will break you and people will give you feedback that you do not want to hear. And if you're not willing to hear it, then it really would take you back and take you in a negative tailspin. Always be reminded who you are as a child of God, but we all have opportunities to grow. And then I would say, be resilient. Be resilient as you're growing in your career, no matter what. There are going to be people who don't like you. There are going to be people that tell you, things about yourself that you don't like. There are going to be jobs that you don't like. There are going to be bosses that are a challenge for you. I always say, outwork them, and make sure that you're building your competence in order to be confident, because you can't be confident without competence.
Mia, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being a part of the leadership table. We're going into our second season, and I thought it would be, the most phenomenal thing in terms of having you here, because we live life together,
We do.
but I never wanted to take you for granted in the leadership qualities that you bring to the table. And so I'm blessed with not only having you in my life, but I'm also blessed with having you here today at the table, being able to share your journey with everybody else. And so thank you again. And just a reminder to all of those who are watching, we want to make sure that you tune into this episode, because I believe that Miss Mia Harrison, man, has laid some jewels and some qualities of leadership that can be taken. So again, thank you for joining us here at the leadership table. And until the next time, keep the faith as we stay in touch. There's always room at the table.
Boxland Media. Think big.